Yeah.
So I decided then I can sell some more books. And
Yeah.
so this is my book, these are my notes.
Yeah.
And please pick it up.
You can also hire me on Wednesdays and
I'm
Fridays.
not hiring you for anything, buddy.
I can be that guy at the bar who comes up to you and says, "Hey man, read that book, amazing," and I'll just walk away.
Oh, that's a wingman.
Yeah,
right.
wingman.
Perfect wingman, yeah.
This
that
is
will
true.
work. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, why name, place, animal, and thing? Why have you called it that? That is a game we used to play at a very young age. Why that? Honestly, I'm
Well, you know,
curious.
first thing I realized, and it's only after my book came out, that actually people don't play this game anymore. The kids do not do this.
Yeah.
And much of this book is actually nostalgia. And Name, Place, Animal Thing is part of that same nostalgia that the mixtape is. It's part of a lot of other nostalgia that exists in this book, because I also realized that times are changing far, like really fast. And if we do not put this somewhere, the new generation with its YouTube, with its new websites, will just wall up everything that existed as history, and our history, your history, my history. As for the title itself, it's broken down to 4 parts, this book. I had a lot of material which I didn't know. The big challenge was, how do I put it into a book form where the narrative is continuous still. We move from one track to another, as if a DJ is revolving it. I'm trying to sound all cool right now because it's meant for young people. And yes, it just fit in, because then I can put all the pieces which are about places that I've loved or found really weird, all the names of people that I find really weird, not the names, but people that I find really weird. Likewise, animal being, of course, the media circus that surrounds us, some of which is also at the back. Just to give them a breaking news story, Randeep Hooda has broken his leg and therefore he couldn't make it. Oh,
Okay.
nobody's interested. Okay, that's okay.
नहीं नहीं आएंगे अबे सर आएंगे आएंगे
Knockoffs. Cell phone is snobbery of the school kid. Affluence sits easy on Mumbai's small head. My 70 rupee flip-flops, unless at a nightclub, or your cheapest cell phone almost everywhere matters less. I've also stayed with my parents at about an age I could have been a parent myself. Nobody's judged me, until some friends, acquaintances, or excuses for both have casually asked, "Where do you live?" Usually a face or two drop, a few eyes lift up. Chembur? Wow, really? Really? You get the drift. They would have sized you up the same way for, oh, Vashi, Thane, Nerul, Pawai, really? Judgment's complete. These are new surnames. Postal address is the only urban caste, your residential coordinates being a fair sum of all your noticeable parts, defining you almost wholly by vintage, income, sociology, aspiration, and your engagement with the city itself. An NGO type blathers on and on to me at a party about the state of the Naxalites in Chhattisgarh and how none of these rich varieties care for the level of discrimination in these parts. I step out with him to take an auto. "Where do you stay?" he asks. "Chembur," he hears and sniggers to my face. There's no question of getting defensive about yourself unless in the company of fine intellect. But a neighborhood, even if you don't know its shortest bylines, is still yours. A home, even if you can't tell the switch of the fans from the light bulbs, is no one else's. I gently defend my Chem's corner once in a while. Its streets leafier than Varsova's, its location closer to both breadths of the city. Hey, there's a new freeway that gets you without any traffic right onto Victoria Terminus in 13 minutes flat from my house. Chembur is the best kept secret of Bombay. Yeah, sure, I may be on logic. But try convincing this friend of mine who's just moved into the city and who probably makes enough to afford a lovely space of his own in a well-maintained housing complex in a relatively virgin suburb, paying mortgage that won't burn a hole in his pocket. Try again. Well, he doesn't quite bust his ass off as all through the year so someone can judge him for where he lives, you know. He aspires for social acceptance and respect among his peers rather than a transiently better quality of life. He hardly has time to hang out at bars or restaurants that make his expensive neighborhood cool. He rarely, if ever, goes out at night or parties in general. He has only early mornings, early starts, long days, and flights to catch every other day. But he will now happily withdraw half his salary, given the new lease, to keep this place, driving up rents even further in the same area every year. Fair enough. Equality is a modern myth. Prejudices, however harmless, are innately human. Either way, someone will eventually capitalize. This is how the lakh in Bombay turns into the new crore, and 34 of those khokhas are paid upfront by an NRI show-off for a 7th-floor, 4-bedroom apartment in a city that he does not even live in. That fellow coughed up about a lakh for every square foot of a piece of sky by the sea. When bookings for that building had started in the early 90s, the going rate was 7,000. Many more I enjoyed this one in particular because I think that, I mean, Mayank, I've seen him always get that Chembur reaction. And I think I actually was one of those people who said, Chembur? And Neha's still one of those people who says, really, Mayank, Chembur? But you're right, it is one of, I think, Bombay's best kept secrets. And I think that you get the best butter chicken in town also right behind that. That's not mentioned in this chapter. And I think that I read this for the first time last night, in between releasing 6 promos for a totally kind of exploitative song called Pani Pani, and the kind of movies that he disses completely, by the way, and a shoot where I was going completely awry. I'm reading this chapter and saying, will I be able to kind of read articulately and not kind of sound completely garbled to all these intellectual people here? And then I didn't really seep in, but when I was reading it right now, hey, it reads well. And I can say one thing about him, I don't know about the book, but I can say one thing is that as far as a guy is concerned, with all his flaws, I'd give him a 4-star.
Whoa. Mayank, you have passed the test. Super. Thank you so much, Pooja. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the reading. Thank you very much. We have a huge round of applause, please. Yes, ma'am, you do get to put the book. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call on stage, honestly, one of my favorite actors and someone who's also been at the forefront for a while for Indian cinema and the new wave of Indian cinema. He's going to come and read one of the chapters that he's chosen. Put your hands together for Abhay Deol. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Mayank? Yeah. He'll just be here in 5 minutes. I think he's downstairs. Oh, he's here. Abhay, thanks so much for being here. Thank you very much, Abhay. Request you to please read. Yes, we've color coordinated each other to death. Abhay, I request you to please read a chapter that I think you chose to read from the book. Yeah. We have found there are 2 options. One is there's the microphone situation here, or there's the podium there. That has been more successful. Yes, this has.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was at another event, which is why. Just made in the nick of time. All right, so this one is called Goras as Gods, which fair and lovely and all. Why the West won't look at us, but we mustn't stop sucking up. We used to be a fairly decent debating team, quite thorough with our research, adept with the arguments, and always aware of every motion being discussed in the House. There are just that many popular contentious issues in the world, and we debated them all during practice sessions, over and over again, if not at actual tournaments, where we would more often than not win. To put it quite mildly, we were stars of Delhi's university debating circuit that academic season. But at Scotland's December freeze that same year, as we walked from one heated college classroom to another, we seemed like 2 odd-skinned, small-built specimens in Western clothes. The first few days, like it is at all knockout sporting tournaments, we had met and convincingly knocked out supposedly weaker teams from Malaysia, Israel, UAE, and the like. Where'd it go? Huh. We were getting noticed. Many would inquire about India's education system after the debates, how we seemed to know so much. I didn't know what there was to say. We were at the World University Debating Championship in Glasgow. How did it matter which part of the world we came from, as long as we were good? Soon I learned it mattered. Excuse me. We moved on to the supposed big league, the upper levels of the tournament, which, unless you were colorblind, looked like a white man's club. All intellectual discourses were meant for the whites, and of course, run by the whites. Their style and delivery, the method, their accents, the chosen topics, and the jury. And accents, they can't help, yeah? No one sounds like us, you know. We hardly felt uncomfortable with our obviously Indian manners, though. We had our points to make on the concerned issues, had counter-arguments ready. We had jabbed a few insane analogies and fished out strong instances to strengthen our case, the way all debates work. Inevitably, an almighty Gora or two would pat us on our backs and tell us, "Great show, guys," as if they were admiring friendly waiters after having been served a fine meal at a restaurant. I can never forget a Canadian opponent who'd pretty much dropped out midway through a heated debate. His hushed congratulation of the party later in the night was, "You guys are good, eh? Where'd you learn to speak English?" Was I to explain or remain stunned and embarrassed? I didn't know. I learned English from the same woman, the queen, who taught you, jackass. I finally got it off my chest. The morning after, alone in bed, it was too late. Seriously? That's what you say when he tells you that, not to yourself in bed. The contests I felt were fairly close too, until we read the points tally, going down one debate after another for reasons completely unknown to us, receiving presumptuous looks from the jury, one debate after another. I just realized no matter how much or how little we knew, they were never going to take us seriously on Earth Charter, Euros, Social Security, or healthcare. We were from Delhi University. If we were debating yoga, spices, IT, or occult instead, things we knew nothing about, it could have been another story. Debates of the sort where you solve the world's problems in 6 or 7 minutes flat get inevitably judged on perceptions, not persuasiveness. We were on the wrong side. At best, first among the third world. We should have been happy to belong to that precious subcategory. It exists in all creative fields, whether literature, arts, or cinema. Western commentators, writers, and painters can be artists of the world. Their equivalent from the Eastern Hemisphere, on the other hand, represent their homeland and must, as far as possible, exoticize it in order to be read, heard, or watched by a wider, whiter audience. I don't deny the West its virtues, its multiculturalism in particular. At least it aspires to it, and that's a quality it must remain proud of. But that's supposed to exist within their known environment. Only then will they probably buy it. It's no different for our movies, unless there's a masterly fluke, like Miranar's Monsoon Wedding. It was the fluke, not from her side. Monsoon Wedding being realistically set in New Delhi, loved within art house circles of New York, although directed by a New York-based filmmaker. Bend It Like Beckham, another beautiful film and a major blockbuster, was about an immigrant population the West does business with. The only Indians from India that the West has been willing to look at have usually appeared in the form of Arabs, monkey eaters, or a fabled Captain Nemo. It never stopped the Indian from sucking up still. Validation from the West is pretty much the ultimate stamp of collective approvals for Indians still. We'd be more than glad to claim any achiever with even a vague trace of Indian blood in their ancestry as our own. Conversely, often someone with an Indian origin in the West is equally expected to have mastered the telling aspects of his ancestry and Indian society while he's lived most of his life abroad and continues to do so. Don't worry, we'll be equally happy to laud you for being Indian if you happen to pick up a Nobel or Booker someday. It's one thing then for Goras, for a change, to become aware of a thoroughly desi Bollywood model who Julia Roberts once called the most beautiful woman in the world. Though we don't quite know when and where she said that about Aishwarya Rai, but never mind that. It's quite another to watch Aishwarya's movie and engage with a point of view. This would be Mistress of Spices. If the point of view is related to India, I guess, it should be ideally about magic, mumbo-jumbo, marriage, and mysticism with a smattering of caste or Kashmir, while at the same time San Francisco, where her film is set, is such a sorted, modern city. This has been going on for a while. Why am I sitting and blabbering about all this stuff now? As you can tell, I just stepped out of Aishwarya Rai's latest Hollywood film, Gurinder Chadda's Mistress of Spices. That was, yeah. Bend no further, please, Chadda auntie. It's not worth it. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Abhay. Abhay, I also just wanted to ask you, out of all the chapters that you could have read from it, you also wanted to read this one. Why was it that this reached out to you the most?
It was short. Well, that and I liked how it plays upon, how it's true, like, for them it was debates, that, oh yeah, debate about yoga, debate about the occult and the esoteric, and we will hear you seriously.
Right.
Don't debate about social security and Euro subjects, because you don't know anything about that. Or rather, coming from you, I can't take it seriously.
Right.
I feel that with film as well. Like, make films about poverty, make films about issues that are Indian.
Right.
Show us something that India is about. But try and make stories about mental health, marital problems, something that the West deals with. No, we'd rather have a white guy do that.
Right. So make
we
what
face
we
the same
tell you,
thing.
make stuff that we view you as. Feed the... right.
It's like, no, it's more like they're open to us as long as we can sell them what they believe us to be.
Right.
But as soon as we try and sell them something that they're unaware of, it's hard to believe.
Right.
Like, you guys have cars and roads? I've actually been asked that once. So.
Wow.
Nice, Sudhir.
Thank you so much, Abhay. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the reading. We have a huge round of applause for Abhay, please. Yeah. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call the man himself, Mayank. I'm going to request... Yeah. I'm going to request Sudhir Mishra, please, sir, could you please come here and read a chapter of your choice? Thank you so much. Could we have a huge round of applause, please? Thank you.
Imagine it's Randeep Hooda. It's a little difficult. Yeah. I have to have a swagger and make believe that, let's not go on. Some people say I'm better, but then they're wrong. So this is a chapter from book. I'm quite familiar with this episode in Indian television and Indian history. I was there. So this is how it goes. How Rajiv Gandhi rewrote the Ramayana. Rajiv Gandhi had just got back from what must have been a fairly tiring day at work. He sat on his couch, switched on his television at home. There were, of course, no channels to zap through. For India's youngest Prime Minister, as for his starved public in the 80s, there was only Doordarshan for visual entertainment. And DD back then had a moral problem with entertainment per se. He left the TV switched on for a while, clearly unimpressed with the dull affairs on his flickering screen, and urgently called to complain to his cabinet colleague, V.N. Gadgil, the then Information and Broadcasting Minister. Rajiv lectured Gadgil off and on how Doordarshan should broadcast serials that depicted the values enshrined in our ancient texts and philosophy. The kind of values that were contained in, say, Mahabharata and Ramayana. As is with bureaucracies, Gadgil copied this to the then INB Secretary S.S. Gill. Gill may have passed it further down. Everyone took the casual suggestion to mean that the Prime Minister wanted Ramayana and Mahabharata to play on DD. There was no time to spare, no tenders, no usual short listings of prospective bidders. Two Bombay filmmakers, Ramanand Sagar and B.R. Chopra, were asked to immediately produce the epics. Bhaskar Ghosh, DD's then Director General, recalls the early episodes of Ramayana lay unused, too shoddy to be put out for public consumption. They had to be aired nonetheless. He had no choice. Rajiv Gandhi had asked for Ramayana. Such is how the biggest moment in Indian television came about. The first time DD ever did entertainment was because a US-based NGO had sold it the idea of a show that promoted family planning in India. Population was a major concern at that time. It still is. The Babus agreed. A public service message like this had had a successful run in Mexico. That Mexican producer was brought in. So was a Hindi writer, Manohar Sham Joshi, and Hum Log entered our colorful imagination. Everyone got glued to India's first soap opera. It'd still be fair to consider the show a flop. Ashok Kumar doling out elderly advice at the end of each Hum Log episode merely became deja vu stuff of Sajid Khan's stand-up comedies years later. No one quite remembers the subliminal messages on birth control from that program. Only that the national only that the nation's first family entertainment drama was born. Maggie Noodles, later sponsored and paid for the whole show, Bunyad, Katha Sagar, etc. followed. Saas Bahus of the late 90s were their confused grandchildren. We still waited during those days for haystacks rotating to a whining tune, to finally form a perfect DD logo on our television screens every evening. Many watched Karamchand, Spider-Man, Byomkesh, Bakshi, The World This Week. Most didn't consume TV in as much quantity still. Videos were the preferred choice of the urban privileged. Cable television made its first appearance in South Bombay's high-rises in the mid-1980s. Those were days when the man of the house, or the man Friday, would go up to the terrace every other day to keep tilting the DD antenna at various angles until the kid shouted out from the window to hold it and fix the antenna just as the position the television's reception got better. The daily exercise were hard to pull off in tall buildings of South Bombay. Some entrepreneurs realized a wire connecting all TV sets of the building to a common antenna could solve this problem. You'd have to tilt only one antenna, I suppose, instead of several at different hours. Housing societies agreed to pay for this service. Residents realized they could also finally reclaim their own building's terrace since the messy floors would get cleared of hundreds of wires, so many antennas at one go. The cable guy knocked on their doors thereafter. This chap figured he could plug that building's shared TV connection to a single video cassette recorder, VCR, and show movies, later video magazines, Lehre News Track, etc., to hundreds at the same time. The video or cable channels had made their Indian debut. Local small-time goons and shopkeepers were the media barons of this industry, churning out pirated and third-rate movie prints. Hotels, also high-rises, began to use these cable guys. Some of the five-star premises, starting with the Taj at Kolaba and Kaf Parade, knowing their foreign patrons in urgent interest in the 1991 Gulf War, bought a special dish antenna that could catch signals of the news feeds from the battlefields, which was easy to do. The hotels were networked with cables anyway. The guest watched the war live. CNN apparently charged $1 per room. Satellite television was here. But there weren't too many satellites in space that could beam directly into Indian television. A rice exporter with no background in TV or media saw an opportunity. He bought a parking spot in a beat-up Chinese satellite, teaming up with an unlikely partner in Hong Kong. India had Z, its own Hindi satellite channel. The entire broadcasting industry that grew in worth from rupees 600 crores to 50,000 crores was technically not legal up until 1999. The government perhaps just didn't know what had hit them from the sky. People in cities stopped watching Doordarshan altogether. Pardon the expression from television, but if we do a quick recap, here's how it all happened. Rajiv Gandhi's message misunderstood, a family planning program gone wrong, the need for a common TV antenna to clear up the wire jungle on the building terraces, a war on Baghdad, and a hotelier's hospitality, Indian television entertainment was thus born. A child of such accidental birth is unlikely to know its front from its backside. Over decades since, the baby is still spinning in circles, simultaneously pooping and recycling its own poop. It never quite grew up. Bring back the old Krishi Darshan, I tell you, and let's start all over again. No? Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. That was an incredible chapter. It was like a shot of memories. But out of all these wonderful shows that we've all grown up watching, why do you think such little is chronicled about the making of, the history of them, their influence on stuff today? Even if you Google any show from the West, there's everything there. Some of our shows don't even have a Wikipedia page. Why do you think we've let that just slide, which is why there's just no history? I'm just going to...
I don't know why, because I think it kind of happened accidentally.
Right.
There were art filmmakers without a job.
Right.
Suddenly somebody gave them a job. They said, can you make this series? Nobody knew what to do. But they did it because they had nothing better to do, and they did it quite well.
Right.
Ultimately, because some of those series were quite good and
Yeah,
stand
super
up
stuff.
to, I mean, there were many more. And I think you kind of figured it out along the way, but there was no budget to keep,
Them alive.
keep them alive or, have some making offs and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, I was there. So, we didn't take ourselves seriously and we were sort of thinking that we were, not doing what we came here to do, which was to change the world with movies.
Right.
But making television,
Right.
Yeah,
And
but
do you think because of that, a lot of the chronicling of information
I
has
think
just
so.
gone
I
left,
think-
right,
yeah, I
and
think
center? What was the favorite show, the one show that you used to watch the most?
I like Bunyad at
Bunyad
that
was
time.
amazing.
I like Tamas a lot. I liked a program called Udan, which Kavita Chaudhary made quite a lot.
Right.
I wrote the pilot of Karamchand.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, it
Okay.
was written quite in a very strange. It was written. Alok Nath was playing Karamchand then in the pilot.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Wow.
The producer,
Sanskari Karamchand.
the producer's person was, well, like the, smoky stuff a lot. So he forgot the camera somewhere because he was doped out. And, we shot it partly in my building and partly in Alec Padamsi's house, who had gone out for dinner, but he came back and then threw us out. But we made I think Pankaj made a good pilot and
Yeah.
Karamchand was born.
And
And,
Karamchand
then,
was
of course, Alok Nath walked into as Babuji and Pankaj Kapoor became.
Wow.
So
So
my
it's-
wife then was Kitty. And so, I was looked down upon for being Kitty's husband. If this guy's married to Kitty, he can't make films,
this is the story.
It's
I think
true.
like, for stories like these and so many more,
Yeah.
we just got to chronicle more.
Yeah, I
and
was
more
also
information.
told I was Keshto Mukherjee's son-in-law because they thought Sushmita Mukherjee was Keshto Mukherjee's daughter. Yeah.
This is
Which I had to live that down as well.
There's been a
It's all true.
lot of confusion with
Yeah.
stories
Yeah,
like
yeah.
these. Yet there's been very little chronicling of stuff like this.
Yeah.
And what did you think of the books, sir? And of course of my.
Well, I was filling in for Randeep Huda, and his critical appreciation is far better than mine, as you know. But maybe I'll tweet about this.
Right, sir. Thank you
Right.
so much, sir. Thank you for your time. Round of applause, please. And now, Mayak, I'm going to ask you to just read a chapter from the book so we can know and hear it from the horse's mouth. Give him a huge round of applause and thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Paper had run a full-page story told through a dozen pictures, shot undercover, no sting jobs, just an event photographer's luck, of Salman in a heated argument with actor Abhishek Bachchan way past midnight at the coffee shop of Mumbai's JW Marriott, Bombay's or Bollywood's main adda den. Salman, it was obvious from the pictures, had his wine glass raised and aimed at Bachchan Jr., who sat meekly in his chair, surrounded by several common friends. The copy detailing the alleged scuffle was collated with generous help from 5 willing waiters at the coffee shop who chose to piece together the incident for us, strictly off the record. This was around 2002 when everyone and their mother in India knew Salman had broken up with girlfriend Aishwarya Rai, who'd in turn had moved on and was then dating co-star Vivek Oberoi. No one had suspected Abhishek Bachchan, her future husband, angle into all this. It was also around the time when reporters rarely took bylines for lowbrow scoops such as these. They were not only embarrassed to be associated with such cheap trash, that's not anymore, of course. The story had gone with my byline. Well, I was 22, a rookie reporter. Who cared? I didn't. Can we talk? I went up to Salman at the film set. Sit, he mumbled, rolling his eyeballs all over the empty hall, choosing to avoid any human contact. I wasn't sure if that sit was intended for me or not, but I sat, not knowing how to start. You colored your hair, Salman? I asked. So? He shot back. There went the first of several efforts at a pleasant icebreaker or a conversation, both of which seemed impossible at this point. So I went ahead with questions anyway. Me, what's happening with the hit and run case? He, it's not a hit and run case. Me, sorry, I meant your case of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Throughout, Salman, referring to himself in third person, would take my questions, but look towards another reporter from the Hindi press. I'm not too sure if Ajay ji is here. From the Hindi press, who had suddenly pulled up his chair next to mine. Likho, and I'm beep. Lik, beep. Jo bhi likhna, lik, beep. Write what you want, Salman would say every few seconds to the poor Hindi journalist who hadn't said a word. He was merely taking notes. Well, I hadn't asked anything that reeked of a will to persecute either. Or at least my tone didn't suggest I had a job. When I read my notes thereafter, all I had for an interview was how the world, according to Salman, had ganged up against him. That had to become my piece, his perspective. It seemed fair to me, but not to his younger brother Sohail, who hauled me up in the loo of a discotheque few nights later, brought me over to the center of the dance floor, pointing his clenched fist towards my jaw, repeatedly asking me to say something about Salman, so I guess he could beat the living daylights out of me and claim he had been provoked to do so. Yeah, filmies can be quite filmy that way. I did survive that moment of journalism of Dutch courage, unheard by the way. You want me to say something about Salman? I'll tell you. He's the most interesting interview I've ever done, I said. Sohail left, dancers hit the floor again. I thanked my vodka Sprite. Few years later, the rally around poor Salman, aged 40 plus, had begun to make sense to some. He was jailed for shooting an animal in a deeply non-vegetarian world. I don't know if he'd acted cocky in the courtroom, but he'd had to pay a fair price for his celebrity. It's quite unlikely anyone had ever been convicted under the Wildlife Protection Act. But we knew now what a black buck was, and it wasn't the black money which in India often goes unpunished and undetected. We realized that what could happen to Salman for hunting endangered animals could also happen to us. Deterrence was complete. Meanwhile, the flakiness of the Indian press and the myth around the misunderstood public figure quadrupled. So did an interest in the life of a successful film actor whose image had taken on levels of a popular fictional character, Abhay, who could be rude and reckless among acquaintances, obsessive and bratty towards his women, disinterested and unpunctual at work, drunken and brawl-happy around foes. He could break a law to allegedly quote the outlaws over the phone, threaten to bring his boxing gloves over to bash up a colleague outside his own house. Tabloids could up their print run. Television could aspire for higher ratings. Yet those who followed and understood his mysterious world were with him or against Shah Rukh Khan, Aishwarya Rai, Katrina Kaif, Vivek Oberoi, and probably even the dead Black Buck. Crybaby Vivek Oberoi would call a whole lot of us over to his drawing room for a live press conference to rat on the bully Salman. It's still the quiet one Salman who would look like the one being screwed over by the press, by the courts, by his colleagues. Being king size on screen made him appear vulnerably human to the world. His reputation remained relatively untarnished. Whatever you say, kuch bhi kaho, bhai dil ke achhe hain. He's nice at heart. Fans in the film business would always say. The fellow once saying this to me, a makeup guy I noticed, could himself pass out for a Salman lookalike, man-child in tight Ed Hardy t-shirts. Ed Hardy t-shirt. He probably wears Being Human tees now, tighter jeans. That's not Salman, that's the makeup guy. Tighter jeans, chest puffed up, bracelet around the waist, a tiny stud in the ear. Admirers of the underworld or politics probably feel the same way about Dawood or the Thakres. Salman Khan seemed to me a Shakti Kapoor with biceps, success, and a lot of fame. As least bothered with his own performances on screen as were the quality of films he'd greenlight. His popularity, and this I'm talking about like the early 2000s, by the way. His popularity grew further still, sometimes regardless of the commercial success of his films. Misjudgment was mine. I saw him as an actor of movies as against a star of Indian cinema. The two are usually unrelated. Outside of Hollywood, and to some extent Hong Kong, India's is the only full-on film industry with a well-defined star system. In the early years of Indian cinema, up until the 1940s, that wasn't the case. As B.D. Garga puts it in his book, So Many Cinemas, a fabulous account of Indian films during this period, more than the stars, it was the filmmaker whose name pulled in the crowds. This is the 40s. Each studio possessed a distinctive image and identity. For its subject, style, treatment, and overall look. I can't talk right now. You want me to stop? You can read the book. You can read the book. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anne.
And now, ladies and gentlemen,
The book is about India and popular culture, and who else to launch it than a man who has dominated every single aspect of it. In our day-to-day life, when a child is born in India, So thank you so much for being here, and I'd also request Mr. Vasant Bhandari, Events Head, UB Group, to kindly present Mr. Bachchan with a token of appreciation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. And now may we also have Mr. Pankaj Vadwa, Director Sales and Marketing on stage, and Tejas Jose, General Manager, Novotel Hotel, to present, sir, with a copy of Name, Place, Animal and Thing for our book launch. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And now may we also have on stage Abhay, Pooja and Mayank to join sir for our wonderful book launch. Thank you.
सर सामने एक सर 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 यहाँ पे सेंटर
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Abhay. Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Thank you, Pooja, for being so kind and launching the book.
Razor sharp wits that I've ever read, and a pen that is dipped in the most purest form of acid. And therefore, when you read some of his reviews of the films that you worked in, you make sure you come to his book launch. That's why I'm here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I think that Mayank has a few questions that he wishes to ask me. I shall now proceed there, because that is what is being dictated by Mayank Shekhar.
Can you invite?
Check 1, 2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachchan, for doing this. You're scared of me?
Yeah. Actually, this is the closest that I've ever been to you in my entire career. So I do hope that you will be kind with me, Hank.
That's not true. There's a long story. There's one time that I was in your house, and that holy party that you
That's
had,
right.
and quite a few bombs down. I really jumped you, but you don't remember that one.
Was that you?
That was me.
Oh, sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. This is the second part of the book launch. Or as they say, since it's a movie in some form or the other, this is the post-interval, and the hero has just arrived. Big hand again, please.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Bachchan,
Incidentally, I was asked to be here at 8:45. It's not that I'm late.
No, you were absolutely on time. We just read those passages really, really fast because they were, well, not the most interesting. But my question to you, Mr. Bachchan, is because one of the passages that we started, from the book's point of view, was on how being Indian, male, and single is a tropical disease, and that's what this book starts with. Quite clearly, that's not true. It's a joke, and it's really to get the reader involved. But you were once also single in college, maybe right after college. When you look back at the Indian man back then, and when you compare the Indian urban man now, the young Indian urban man now, especially when it comes to relationship between men and women, how do you think things have changed over the past 5 decades?
I think I'll have to go back to my school days. That was in the 50s, excuse me. And I was in a boarding school, Sherwood College in Nainital, and we had a sister school called All Saints. And one of the highlights of being in Sherwood was that every Sunday the girls would come to chapel, which is the church in our school. And that was the moment when the entire school was dressed in their finest, and polished shoes and polished buttons on your blazer, because each one of us had a favorite amongst the girls' school, and we were hoping that they would notice us so that we could, when they came up for our sports event or for our drama event, the program that was a very rough cyclostyle kind of a page was put inside very neatly decorated, hand-drawn covers that we made for that particular lady, whom we were very fond of. And that was the ultimate form of romance, call it romance or expression of love, that we could do. It's putting that paper in a hand-drawn kind of a paper cover and asking the head girl of the school to distribute it out to them. Then you went into college, and university, as you will know, is a different ball game. And because I was in Delhi University, the entire university caught the bus that would stop at Miranda House, because that's where all the girls were. And everyone, even though their college was miles away, would get off there and just to have a look at these beautiful girls. Some very embarrassing moments happened, because I was in Kirodimal College, and Miranda House decided to do a play where they required 3 men. And our drama instructor in Kirodimal was very kindly asked that if he could recommend a few names. So 2 boys were selected from St. Stephen's, and yours truly was selected from Kirodimal. And this entire college ambition to somehow be able to enter these very pure and pristine walls of the Miranda House was finally going to be accomplished, and we were just delighted. So on the first day of rehearsal, we were asked to come from the back gate into Miranda House. And we walked in with a lot of pride, looking around. And the dormitories are right above, and all the girls were standing there. And it's the first time that I realized how embarrassing it is for a woman, for a lady, when she's not really abused, but teased on the streets, because when the 3 of us walked in, all these girls that were standing there, kya chal hai? Kya style hai yaar? And some whistles were being blown and stuff like that. It was truly, truly embarrassing. That's the first time I realized, what ladies go through on the streets. That apart, then we went into job hunting. I was working in Calcutta. And you're truly independent there. And the very maximum that you did was on the weekend you went to one of the prominent restaurants for a meal, ended up at another restaurant where there was dancing. Dancing was different in those times.
But how did you...
there was physical contact. You held a lady very gracefully, and you waltzed with her, or you foxtrotted with her. And then suddenly came this music where you had no contact at all, and you never even realized whether your partner was dancing with you or the person next door. And those are some of the things that... There was a lot of letter writing. There was more expression through that, but I don't know how today's youngsters conduct themselves.
Well, Cyrus does. He goes on Tinder and nobody swipes to the right. But Mr. Bachchan, to what extent do you think popular cinema in particular has had a huge impact on the way men and women interact with each other?
Yeah, I think that, cinema in many ways imitates life, and we have several filmmakers here who would agree with me. They read something, they see something, they observe something, and then they develop and they create around it. Many times, cinema is accused of, sending a wrong impression or a wrong visual out. But I think equally responsible are some of the other people who project what happens. And this is not, anything to say against you, I dare not. But sometimes, let's say, for example, they say that, cinema propagates violence, but Indian cinema is just 100 years old. But are you trying to tell me that there was no violence before that?
Sure.
Some of the greatest tragedies and violence happened during the time of the partition of the country.
No, I think I meant it more in a positive sort of way, where you were sending out signals, how to say, how to approach a woman, how to be, romantic with her, how to dress a certain way, how to date, for instance. People, do you think they take signals from the movies far more than they do from, peers who are absolutely as clueless at that age anyway?
Yeah, you're asking this to the wrong
Do you think?
person.
Why?
Because I haven't a clue. Really, I don't know how youngsters behave today and what they do.
But were you personally influenced? Your idea of romance did at some level come from popular films that you grew up on?
The films that I grew up on they were very staid, they were very formal, really conforming to contemporary style, which was, you sang songs. And you saw somebody in the window and you stood outside on the side of the road and you sang songs. And I'm sure that many of you will agree that some of the most beautiful romantic songs were developed during that time. Now I don't know, it's very rapid. It happens very fast. And actually the people don't have too much patience, which is why they want to get over it within the first 5 minutes of a film. Yeah, okay, so what next? Let's get on with it, that kind of an attitude.
Right. But going back to the aspect of influence, Mr. Bachchan, there's a piece in this book which is deeply critical of the sort of heroes we used to have in the 80s. And they, at some level, or so it argues, led to the male stalker being seen as a Hindi film hero, and that we saw much more of that in the 80s than in any other decade. And thankfully, we've sort of crossed that now. That was a phase from the past. How did you see that phase, or do you even agree that is vaguely true?
I just said, I think that was not so much as stalking somebody as really
you stand
wanting to
outside
find an
someone's
excuse.
building, you catcall, you whistle. If she says no, she actually means yes. Tikhi she is. There's too many songs that sort of typify that.
Yeah, that's what I said. I think that period was more devoted to just being able to stand outside and appreciate somebody beautiful and devise lines and write beautiful verses. Now, of course, it's different, but it was more poetic, I feel, and a lot more gentle than it is now.
Speaking of influence, Mr. Bachchan, and here I'm talking about not influence from an individual's perspective to our popular movies, but the crazy influence that Bollywood has had. I'm sorry I used that word, and I will not in this discussion anyway, since you abhor Bollywood, but the crazy influence that Hindi cinema has had across the world. Now, of course, we talk about, say, you doing Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby, or Priyanka Chopra presenting at the Oscars, and here and there, so-called, the West, in terms of Western Europe and North America. But for the longest, if you take a left from India and you go to Pakistan, you go to Afghanistan, you go further down to, North Africa, you go to, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, it's crazy the kind of influence that Hindi films have had. What do you make of this? Like, what is it that they've been watching for so many years? Because it's very organic. There was, to the best of my knowledge, not so much support from the government. It's not like it just happened on its own. What happened?
Yeah. When you say go left from India, you're
I
looking
know,
at
I'm
India
giving
like
the
this,
Western
or-
perspective.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think that there's always been a cultural difference. The sentiments are different between our side of the horizon as opposed to them. If you look at, the fact that the first men came out, or the first humans came out of Africa and they traveled north across to Asia, and they split up into two groups. One went left to the west and the other to the right. The left turned out to be more technologically sentimental. The right was more emotionally sentimental. That's the closest that I can get to it. But yes, you're right. A lot of our films have been seen in these regions and have gained prominence. And the only answer that I can give is that perhaps they were culturally closer to these people as much as the other side of the horizon was culturally away from it or distant from it. That's all we can say. And the same sentiment happens when their cinema comes to us. I mean, if there's a Titanic or a Bruce Lee or some kind of a fantasy, it does extremely well because there's not too much emotion apart from Titanic. But if they have a family drama that would come here, it, I think, would not fare too well. And if we project some of our stuff that side, they are unable to understand the sentiment of poetry and romance and song and dance, which is, we've inherited that from our 5,000-year culture. And that's the difference that I see.
Right. Mr. Bachchan, there's a piece in this book which is on travels in Iran and in Tehran in particular. But there's this one time that we were walking down the street of a town called Isfahan, and there were people who accosted us and took pictures of us because we were Indians and therefore from the land of Amitabh Bachchan. Right? Now this is, people take our photos because we come from the same country as you do.
You're kidding.
Not kidding at all.
Really?
Not kidding. And you know that happens. What is the craziest thing that happens to you? I mean, if this is what happens to me because I come from this country where you belong to, what happens to Amitabh Bachchan himself? What is the craziest thing that you've seen that's made you wonder what kind of reach in the films have had?
Yeah. When I think of this, I first think of Rajesh Khanna and his unbelievable superstardom. And he's really been the truest superstar of our industry. And during the time I was shooting Anand with him, he used to get a lot of visitors on set. And there were many occasions when there were people coming in from distant countries, Spain in particular. And I used to wonder, what has Spain got to do with Indian movies? But that's when I realized that there is a reach. People who came from Beirut, for example, were extremely fond of Shami Kapoor. And people that came from Russia, of course, were in love with Raj Kapoor ji. So we always knew that there was something there. But I myself, I went out in the early 80s to do a concert on stage, which was, I thought, a terrible thing for me to do because I was least equipped with it. But some of the people pushed me, and that's when we realized the amount of love and affection and the intensity of what Hindi cinema or Indian cinema has on the Western audiences. There have been great examples. Every time I've say my first visit to Egypt, for example, is quite peculiar because I was flying in from Europe to a festival, international film festival in Cairo. And on the plane, I noticed that there was an Arabic paper which had my photograph, and I was wondering what it was, so I asked some of them. And they said, no, this is, you are coming to Cairo, and your film, Mard, is running here in some 142nd week or something like that. So I said, this is ridiculous, and somebody's probably doing some rumor mongering here. But when I landed in Cairo, it was a unique experience because in the first time in my life, my customs and immigration was done in my hotel. I was just bulldozed from the aircraft with crowds of people and a lot of enthusiasm. And just, thank you. And that just, it just pushed me out, and And the security and the police said, "We've got to get you out of here, sir." And they just pushed me into the car and took me to the hotel. And that's where I met the immigration officer. South Africa was another unique experience when I went there for the first time to do a concert. And before the actual concert happened, it was in a football stadium. We had an audience of almost 80,000 people, which is very unique because when we heard about concerts going out, there were more than just 100, 200, 300 people. But this is unbelievable. And before that, we had to go and meet a certain Indian community that lived a little distant from Durban. It was called Watford. And they said, "These are people who cannot afford the tickets to come to your show, and it'll be nice if you can go and meet them. It'll give them an opportunity to meet you." So we drove, and half an hour into the drive, the police came in and said, "Stop, we cannot go any further because all the roads leading to this mall where I was supposed to meet this Indian community is blocked with people, and we'll have to think of another way of getting you in." So they brought in a helicopter on the highway, and I got into it, and we flew, and we landed on the roof of the mall. And there was just unbelievable mass of humanity, which is just incredible.
Can I tell you a story where you saved a life? So I can't remember which of the two newspapers, but one of my colleagues, a very famous crime journalist, S.O. Zedi, once called me up and said, "Do you know Amitabh Bachchan?" I said, "I think that's a pretty stupid question to ask. I mean, everybody knows Amitabh Bachchan. Whether he knows me is the question, you know what I mean?" So he said, no, I want to know whether you can can you make somebody meet Amitabh Bachchan? So I'm like, "Depends, yeah. Is it a life and death thing?" I was just kidding with him. He said, "Yes." I said, "What happened?" So Hussain Zaidi was in Baghdad doing an investigative story, trying to look for a Baghdadi Don. And as one of the best investigative journalists should do, he was in the bazaar of Baghdad asking people if they know where the Don is. Next thing he knows, he is inside the den of the Don, and it's clear that he's going to be killed. And it's only a matter of few minutes before they'll shoot him dead, because he can't answer exactly what they're saying, and they know there's something wrong here. And then the Don finally comes to the den, God knows for what, and just checks on him, says, "Where are you from?" He said, "India." I don't even know whether he said it in English. He said, "India." Say, "India? Amitabh Bachchan?" Say, "Yeah." "Know him?" "Yeah." "Make me meet him?" "Yeah." "Let him go. 1 sec. Did meet my son, Abhishek." It's crazy. So you have saved a life for sure.
Wow.
That I know of. Mr. Bachchan, when you're on doing a blog, for instance, or when you're on Twitter, that's when you get a sense of how you have fans across the world because they interact with you on a daily basis. In fact, one of the pieces in the book really talks about, while you were also the first superstar to get on television, you were actually also the first superstar to take blogging very seriously.
Do you have to keep saying superstar all the time? Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Apparently you're scared of me, so I need to reiterate in my head so that it doesn't go to my head right now. Now, when you started doing your blog, and here's the sense I get. I got a sense that perhaps you're also documenting your life like an autobiography while you're also blogging. Is that true? Or
No.
are you also writing an autobiography?
No, I'm not. It's not worth even considering. But yeah, the blog has been a great revelation for me. I never knew what it was, and when I was introduced to it, I just wrote a few lines and I got a response, and I thought this is terrific. And then the next day I wrote another one, and I got 2 more. And now I'm on day 2,902 days, non-stop, every day. On Twitter, I'm on 2,119, and on Facebook, 1,289.
The next one being this launch, I presume.
So yes, it's a great experience, and it's wonderful to know them. I just gave them a title, the people that came onto my blog, I called them my extended family. I gave them in a kind of abbreviated form, I called them my EF, and they're all over the world. And it's really become a wonderful family, because every time I travel outside, say if I go to England or if I go to New York or somewhere in Europe, there is an EF there somewhere. They all come and meet me, and now I know almost 200-300 of them by face. They come to India, they come to Mumbai, and there are a lot of EF in Mumbai, and they're in touch with each other, and when they come, they stay in each other's places. If I'm, say, I was performing my father's poetry in Paris at the Théâtre du Champs-Élysées, and they all came to know, and about 40 of them collected money through their earnings. And for the first time, they all gathered together, somebody from South Africa, somebody from Middle East, from San Francisco, from England, from Germany, and they all gathered at the same point at the airport in Paris and met each other for the first time. They all stayed together, and they all came to the function together.
You're like a Rotary Club of your own.
Yeah, it was just wonderful. So yes, it's been a great experience and a great joy.
But have you not considered writing an autobiography?
No, it's not
No?
worth it, no.
I think you should consider doing a book of conversations. I think about 10,000 words of conversations with you we could turn into a book. Gaurav and Shikha are around. We can sign a contract right now. But my question to you, Mr. Bachchan, is, do you, like everyone else, do you get trolled on Twitter?
Oh, yes.
No
Oh,
way.
yes. Yeah. The choice abuses, which obviously I cannot mention here. And I never block them, because I think it's good to know what other people think about you. And there are many that are not very kind and generous in their remarks. But that's fine. And yes, I do get abused every day, almost.
Are you otherwise?
And sometimes you get the odd remark which is kind of sarcastic, and that gets picked up by the media, and a whole headline is made out of it. Like recently when I went to Kolkata and sang the national anthem. In my Facebook, in the responses that I get on my Facebook day, about 2,000 responses. So somewhere down in the 1,000 something, somebody, और वो 4 करोड़ रुपए जो लिया था गाने के लिए, उसका क्या हुआ? It's just a stray remark, and that was picked up. And the media went crazy, and I had a very senior journalist actually send me a message. So, did you take that 4 crore rupees? And I was pretty disappointed, because I felt that, I never expected somebody of your breeding and your attitude and your, maturity to be able to even think that somebody would charge money for singing the national anthem. But that's what it is. But worse happened, because now somebody has filed a case against me for singing the anthem 22 seconds longer than what it should be. So if they call me again, I'll have to sing it within 58 seconds. Yeah. But, it's strange, because nobody would have ever known the person who filed this case, but now he's a world-renowned figure. So this happens very often with people in public life and who have some kind of celebrity status. Just to take a shot at you, they will have their moment of importance. And it's something that you cannot avoid, and you have to live with it. So right now there are several cases against me which are emanating from things like this.
You said some kind of celebrity status. You're probably called a superstar, or I said it thrice. Is this at some level your defense against the fact that for the past 4 or 5 decades, people have just been calling you great, Big B, Shansha? Are you tired of people telling you or praising you all the time?
Yeah,
does it like get to you after a point?
It's not healthy, because it's not deserving. And even if it was, I just feel that if somebody was deserving of being called by these wonderful epithets, it would stunt their growth in many ways. The moment you start believing that you're great and you're big, then somewhere you don't think of expansion, or don't think of going any further. So it's good to just remain very normal and still wanting to learn be challenged by something which you haven't done, or look at your tomorrow's day with a lot of anticipation, with fear, with anxiety as to what is going to happen, whether I'm going to be able to perform, and whether it's going to be perfect, whether it's going to be understood or not. But these are some of the things that goes through my mind every day, so I couldn't possibly...
But one can't take away from the fact that when you started, there was 1970, which was the first term of Indira Gandhi, and from then you're still the movie. You just thank you, congratulations for the national award.
Oh, thank you.
This is so from the first term of Indira Gandhi to the the current term for Modi, from 1970 to 2016. You know, governments have changed. You know, Tinder has come in, or whatever has not come in, and this book is only about the past 20 years. But you've dominated absolutely everything for those decades.
No,
that cannot be taken away.
No, that's not true. Really.
That's not true.
Yeah. There are many other public figures who've had an extremely long life.
Tell me one who's Indian.
I think a lot of politicians have had a much larger and a longer public life. If I'm not wrong, our present President of India, Pranab Mukherjee, he's had one of the longest tenures of public life. He's been a member of parliament, he's been ministers in several different cabinets, and look, he's still...
Speaking of which, everyone's talking about whether you will accept if you were offered to become the President of India. That's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
You brought it up.
This has to be a joke, obviously, so because this evening is full of humor and wit, I shall accept that with a lot of humor and wit.
So you won't or you will?
It's a joke.
It's a joke, okay. One of the things that the book touches on, and this is my last question before I read the acknowledgement of the book and then come back. Actually, this is not my last question. It has to do with acknowledgement. Is happiness, the idea of happiness. And Mr. Bachchan, you've seen ups and downs, and because you've been a public figure throughout, so we all know about your highs and lows and ups and downs. But what makes you happy?
Well, right now I'd like to get back and go back to the game.
You asked me to hurry up, yes. I'll quickly go
Score
through.
क्या हुआ?
Score क्या?
शाबाश गेल गया कि नहीं अरे गया
So this is
सर उसको घर पे आया तो उसको इतना खिलाया पिलाया उसका हाथ पैर जोड़ा हो गया काम
I'll quickly go through the acknowledgement of the book and get on to the last question so we can also so yeah, I read.
हे गेला अरे गेला है सर गेला
So just to get on to the acknowledgement of the book, and before we finish the evening and get on to the game as well, need to thank a few people who are responsible for this book. Of course, the first person would be Akar Patel, who gave me a column when I was about 23 years old. I had to grow a goatee. At that time, when Mr. Bachchan had one, I had no brief, not even Bollywood or popular culture. I froze every week. This seemed all too overwhelming for me. So thank you, Akar. He's not here, he's in Bangalore. Each piece in this book, and it's abridged, slightly altered, or another version, has appeared in the following publications: Midday, Mumbai Mirror, Sunday Midday, Caravan, Open Magazine, Hindustan Times, New York Times, Man's World. I think Radha is here somewhere. Thank you, Radha. And the Indian Quarterly. As for the book itself, there's my publisher, Shikha Sabarwal, editor, Pooja Dadwal, my agent, Kanishka Gupta. Thank you most of all for being patient. Yes, I go MIA once in a while, and let me make no excuses this time. It's mainly to hang out with friends, which is the only life I know. And my friends are all here. And thank you so much for being there. The next book, I'm going to have a friends list. So of all the people, so make sure that you buy a couple of copies of the book. It costs less than a pint of beer, and the beer tonight is free. So we're all good. Now, film critic Gene Siskel had a simple but profound question he would sign off all his celebrity interviews with, leaving many flummoxed by the end of it. It's something I'm told Oprah Winfrey credited and incorporated in her talk show later. the question, what do you know for sure? Meaning, I guess, if everything changed about your life, was that one thing you're sure won't? In other words, that one thing that really matters actually, it's a tough one for anyone. For me, it's quite simply my best friends, who only coincidentally happen to be my family, my parents, my dad, my mom. Please sit, please. My brother Alok is back somewhere. His little kids, Ira, AJ, Raki. Like this book, like everything else, is for you. And can I please have my parents over so they have a gift for you, Mr. Bachchan?
Yeah, sure. Other questions over? Oh, thank you so much.
पेंटिंग है
मधुबनी, oh yes.
My mom is
मधुबनी से हैं। उनकी तो पेंटिंग बहुत चलो, thank you. चलो, thank you.